Chapter 436. Klein's Request. Seeing the white foam of the Southville beer being placed in front of Sherlock Moriarty, Carlson finally came to his senses. It was only when the bartender was a certain distance away from them did he ask in a suppressed voice,
"What do you want?"
Klein picked up his glass and took a sip. He took a few seconds to savor the bitter taste of the malt and the faint sweetness from it. He looked sideways at Carlson and smiled before raising his glass.
Cheers.
Without hesitation, Carlson shook his head and refused the offer, mumbling,
"You have beer, while I have strong distilled liquor. It's not suitable for a toast."
Klein was only going through the motions, so he once again took a sip of his Southville beer, looked straight ahead, and chuckled.
What I want is very simple. I'm not sure what's inside the tomb, so I can only describe it rather vaguely. Well, I hope that I can choose an item from the spoils of your tomb exploration. I'm not greedy, and my request will not involve high-sequence items. I wouldn't dare to take it, even if they were one of the options. If you find nothing or there are only high-sequence items, then I don't want anything. Of course, I believe that when the latter happens, you wouldn't be stingy with giving me a sum of cash that's consistent with my contribution.
After hearing about the Amon family's tomb from Miss Sharon yesterday, he had came up with rough plans. The first plan was to blow the copper whistle, contact Mr. Azek, and join forces to explore the tomb. However, there were many potential problems with this plan. Firstly, he was unsure of the amount of strength Azek, who was still in the midst of finding his lost memories, had regained. Secondly, Azek was being pursued by MI9, so it was very easy for him and Azek to land in trouble. Thirdly, there was a high chance that Klein would end up reappearing in the sites of sealed artifact 008 once again. Of course, he could also consider using the help of the gray fog to make contact or embark on the expedition. However, blowing the copper whistle above the gray fog made it impossible to summon the messenger, therefore ending all of his subsequent plans. More importantly, Klein didn't dare to reveal the secret of the space above the fog to Azek Eggers, whose identity remained a mystery. Therefore, he finally chose the second method, which was to use his identity as an informant to submit the information to the machinery hive mind and ask for a reasonable reward. When it came to the number of high-sequence Beyonders, which faction could have more than the 7 churches? According to what Klein knew, there were close to 10 high-sequence Beyonders in the Church of Evernight. In other words, nearly half of the 13 archbishops and 9 high-ranking deacons had reached or surpassed sequence 4. This wasn't considering the Blessed of the Goddess, the Pope, who helmed the church. Even if the situation regarding the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery was inferior in this aspect, it couldn't be that inferior. Their archbishop of the Backlund diocese, Hieronymus Haydn, was a high-sequence Beyonder. And as such, for an Orthodox church, with all its resources accumulated to date, it wouldn't value the mid-sequence items very much. Klein believed that he could negotiate a reasonable price. Simply put, the core element of the second plan was find an organization for any difficulties. Upon hearing Klein's offer, Carlson paused for a second, then blurted out,
"Aren't you a believer in God?"
I've always had the goddess in my heart.
Klein drew a triangular sacred emblem on his chest.
It is because of my belief in God that I've told you this information, not to the Nighthawks through Mr. Stanton. God said to let those who wish to be strong, be strong. Only by becoming stronger and having more money can I have more access to different channels and resources, and thus provide you with better and more effective information.
In order to convince the machinery hive mind, he had specifically spent the morning reading through the Steam and Machinery Bible that he had bought earlier. He then found a few sentences from the deity that met his requirements and memorized them. Carlson was momentarily unable to provide a rejoinder. He just sat there, stunned, to the point of forgetting to drink. Seeing this, Klein quickly added,
Moreover, this will help you establish a harmonious and efficient relationship with new generation informants. As long as you spread the news of the rewards I receive as a result of this, as well as keeping your promise without going back on your word, then I believe that the other informants will be deeply moved and be greatly motivated to do their best to gather useful information for you. Of course, I wish that you use my pseudonym when advertising this.
Carlson listened with a blank face, picked up his glass, and gulped down a mouthful. He almost choked. He sighed.
Cough. Sherlock, the real you is completely different from what I remember about you from before.
The detective Sherlock Moriarty, in his memories, was good at analysis and reasoning. He was extremely calm and polite, and, with a great sense of justice, had offered very effective advice. He was an outstanding believer in God, yet now he was Chapik calm. Klein took a sip of his beer and chuckled.
Everyone has their different sides. Using a single facade to face everything is prone to error. This is a problem you have to pay attention to when making deductions.
After calming down for a moment, Carlson stood up and said,
I have no right to agree to such a request. I will report it immediately, so wait here for a while.
All right.
Klein waved to the bartender and added a serving of potato wedges. By the time he leisurely finished his food and beer, Carlson returned to the bar with the deacon of the machinery hive mind, Eikenser Bernard. Eikenser looked around, and seeing that there was no one around, he said in a deep voice,
There's no problem with your request, but there's one condition to add on. Items with strong side effects and curses are not among the items available for selection.
What I want is an ingredient.
Klein immediately laughed.
All right. Dare I ask again, is this your personal decision or the response from the higher-ups?
I have the right to make such a decision.
Eikenser used his hat to press down on his fluffy hair.
But since it concerns an aristocratic tomb from the 4th epoch, I had sent a telegram to the Archbishop, and he didn't object to it in his reply.
All right.
Klein drew another triangular sacred emblem on his chest.
I'll give you the information now.
Eikenser shook his head subconsciously. He looked around and pointed to a billiard room.
Let's talk inside.
This deacon, who is always publicly placed on trial by the mirror called a Rhodes, is quite experienced.
Klein murmured and followed Eikenser and Carlson into the billiard room while making sure that the adjacent rooms were empty. Klein paused for a few seconds and said with some deliberation,
The thing is, there was a beyonder who found a hidden tomb at the mouth of the Stratford River in Whitecliff Town. He searched the periphery and found some items. After that, they recruited people and did further explorations, but no one returned. If you search carefully over there, you will definitely find the corresponding traces.
After listening carefully, Eikenser asked,
Are you sure it's an aristocratic tomb from the 4th epoch?
The items on the outside can prove that they're members of the Tudor dynasty's Aemon family.
Klein answered truthfully. He then warned him.
The Beyonders who died in there weren't weak at all, and there were quite a few of them. I believe that this tomb isn't something that can be explored by those below high-sequence Beyonders.
Eikenser frowned instinctively.
Aemon.
It could be seen that, as a deacon, he had the authority to know some ancient secret history. Without waiting for Klein to emphasize it again, he looked up and said,
We will collect the relevant information first before we act. A 4th epoch aristocratic tomb is very dangerous. Don't tell this information to anyone else, or explore it yourself. Otherwise, you and your friends will only lose their lives.
If I dared, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Klein gave a self-deprecating laugh and said,
My reputation has always been good.
After making the deal, he watched Eikenser and Carlson leave before putting on his hat and sauntering out of Lucky Bar.
Towards the nobles of the 4th epoch, as well as the Aemon family, the machinery hive mind will still be very cautious. They'll have to have at least several days of preparing before they take action. Prudence.
Klein's random thoughts froze on a single word. He thought of another thing that could be described as being prudent.
After Roselle had joined the ancient organization suspected of being the Twilight Hermit Order, he had actually never mentioned its name in his own secret diary, which was written in Chinese. Each time he would refer to it by referring to it with the appropriate characteristics. This level of prudence was a very suspicious phenomenon. Why didn't Emperor Roselle dare to mention the name of that organization, even when it's written in Chinese? This is completely different from the style of writing where he dared to write anything in his diary. What was he afraid of, or what was he worried about? Could it be that as long as he said or wrote down the name of the Twilight Hermit Order, then they would be made aware of it no matter which language he used? Does one of their members, or a sealed artifact they possess, have such abilities?
A guess popped up in Klein's mind, but there was no way to confirm it unless he was willing to take the risk.
I'll first assume it's true, and that I haven't been perceived by them, because the channeling of the Desire Apostle's spirit had been done above the gray fog. Informing Miss Justice of it was also done in response to a prayer using the gray fog. Well, it is almost Monday, and I have to remind Miss Justice at the Tarot Club not to say or write down the name Twilight Hermit Order. As for the reason, she can understand it by herself, with me simply giving her a look.
Klein quickly made his next arrangements and strode out of Lucky Bar. Seeing that it was still early, he took a horse carriage to the Quelaag Club, intending to spend the afternoon there. As soon as he entered the hall, he saw the equestrian teacher, Talim Dumont. This descendant of blue blood was seated in a corner, holding a glass of scarlet grape wine. His face was rosy, and he was sipping it in high spirits. Klein smiled and greeted him.
You seem to be in a good mood, Talim.
Talim chuckled and said,
Because the new year is coming.
Then, rather excitedly, he asked,
Sherlock, do you know what it's like to really like someone?
Klein showed a fake smile.
I'm sorry, I'm still single.
Talim finished the rest of his wine, stood up, waved his hand, and said,
That's a pity. Well, I have to get busy.
By the way, thank you for introducing Mr. Framus Cage.
Klein recalled the investment of the bike project and sincerely expressed his gratitude.
When are you free these days? I'd like to get you to bring me around to sample some of Backlund's delicacies.
After the new year.
Talim put on his hat and walked with a smile to the reception hall.
Has this fellow entered the season of love?
Klein couldn't help but mutter. Just as he turned around and took a few steps, he suddenly heard a heavy thud. Klein jerked his head back and saw Talim Dumont on the ground, his left hand clamped tightly at his chest where his heart was. His body was convulsing non-stop.
This.
Klein hurried over, but at this moment Talim had already spat out all of the white foam on his mouth, losing his last breath of life. In just a few seconds he had turned into a dead corpse. Chapter 437, Obituary. This wasn't the first time Klein had seen someone familiar die in front of him, but it was the most abrupt and unforeseen death. The expression on Talim Dumont's face when he had asked about what it felt to really like someone was a vivid expression of hidden excitement and flaunting, but one which couldn't be directly shared due to the need of being careful as a result of certain factors.
That was too fast. Normal diseases do not cause death so quickly.
Klein's expression was solemn as he lightly tapped his molars to activate his spirit vision. He dropped to one knee and crouched down. He saw Talim Dumont's aura and the colors of his emotions fading rapidly. Furthermore, there were strands of black gas wrapped around his heart, like a snake, which were gradually dimming.
A beyonder ability similar to a curse?
Klein instantly made a preliminary conclusion. At this moment, a nearby red-vested attendant and a servant girl in a black and white dress ran over. They looked at the dead body on the ground in horror. His eyes were wide and round, and the corners of his mouth still had remnant white foam. Klein closed his eyes and instructed in a deep voice.
Go to the nearby police station and tell them someone died here.
Yes, Mr. Moriarty.
The red-vested attendant immediately turned around and ran out the door, so flustered that he even forgot to put on his coat. Under the watchful gaze of the crowd, Klein didn't check Talim's belongings, nor did he try to pull out a few strands of hair for a divination attempt when he wasn't around anyone. His identity was already considered semi-official, so he could use the power of the machinery hive mind to conduct a follow-up investigation. There was no need for him to act as a lone hero. thinking of the many times he had played cards with Talem Dumont and how he had introduced clients and investors and the love story that had been hanging in his mind for so long. Klein couldn't help but take a long, slow, deep breath.
Who's Talem's murderer? Which Beyonder, who's adept at curses, did Talem offend? Judging from his attitude today, he should be in a very happy and calm state, completely unaware of the fact that he has provoked a terrifying character.
Questions flashed through Klein's mind, but his lack of understanding about Talem Dumont resulted in a lack of soil to nurture any inspiration. When the police arrived, he was questioned as a witness, and that wasted quite a bit of his time. It wasn't until all of this was over that Klein had a chance to leave Hillston Borough and head back to Lucky Bar in the Backland Bridge area. Carlson was still there drinking, the only difference being that his drink had been exchanged from a strong distilled liquor made from pure malt to golden, frothy beer. Klein raised his right hand, covered his mouth, and squeezed over. He lightly knocked on the table and said,
Is your job to drink here every day?
Carlson jumped in fright as he turned his head, relaxing only when he saw that it was Sherlock Moriarty.
You, what is it now?
This reaction is very familiar, Klein sighed silently and said gravely.
There is a case involving Beyonders.
Carlson looked around and saw that Lucky Bar already had quite a number of patrons. They were either hollering over their glasses or eager to fight in the ring.
Follow me. Let's play a round of billiards.
Carlson nudged his thick glasses and carried his beer to an empty billiard room. Klein followed, closing the door behind him. Eclos. He said in passing,
Your alcohol tolerance seems pretty good.
No, I just drink very slowly.
Carlson put down his glass and picked up the cue stick. Then, he added inexplicably,
And I'd like some alone time lately.
I don't care about that.
Klein pursed his lips and said,
I encountered a death at the Quelaag Club in Hillston Borough. That was a friend of mine, a noble descendant, and an equestrian teacher. He's usually healthy, and had recently been in a very good mental state, but just now, he suddenly died in front of me. It looked like a heart attack, but my spirit vision told me that he might have been cursed.
Carlson asked subconsciously,
You're adept at spirit vision?
What sort of details did Mr. Stanton fabricate for me? After becoming a machinery hive mind informant, they never even asked me which pathway I was, or which sequence I'm at, nor did they try to find out about my origins and background. Of course, letting an informant keep certain secrets of their own is also a common tactic used by official organizations.
Klein frankly responded,
Yes, the chest of the deceased had some decaying, illusory black gas.
It does involve the possibility of a curse and a Beyonder.
Carlson didn't ask further as he slowly nodded.
Hillston Borough. That's the territory of our machinery hive mind.
In the northwest of Backland, which was the heart of the metropolis, Empress Borough and Cherwood Borough came under the mandated Punisher's jurisdiction. The western and northern areas came under the Nighthawks, and Hillston Borough and Backland Bridge area came under the machinery hive mind. Having said this, Carlson looked at Klein and attempted to confirm the details.
What deity does your friend believe in?
After thinking carefully for a few seconds, Klein replied hesitantly,
The Lord of Storms.
Carlson asked, with a frown.
A believer of the Lord of Storms. Is he the only deceased?
Klein gave an affirmative answer.
Yes.
Carlson chalked the cue stick and sighed.
We have no right to take the case. This is under the mandated Punishers, but I will pass on your information to them.
In the Lowen Kingdom, the principle of jurisdiction over Beyonder events was first to divide them according to their beliefs. If they involved the followers of multiple deities, then it would be decided according to who held jurisdiction over the area. Klein was no stranger to this. He had no intention of making things difficult for Carlson, so he earnestly said,
Thank you. I hope they can find the real killer as soon as possible.
Carlson picked up the glass of beer beside him and took a sip.
He's a descendant of blue blood. The mandated punishers will definitely take it seriously.
Pausing for a second, he looked at Klein and said in a low voice,
I find it hard to believe that you've only been in Backland for about 3 months. You seem to have established a wide range of social connections and possess lots of resources here.
Klein shook his head with a self-deprecating laugh before bidding farewell.
Some people are naturally adept at this.
By the time he got back to Minsk Street, it was completely dark and the gas lamps lining the streets were being lit by workers. Although his relationship with Talim Dumont didn't go deep, he was an acquaintance he met nearly every week. He was a friend he would play cards with every now and then, and Talim was rather warm and had always exalted him as a great detective. Furthermore, he had practiced what he preached by introducing clients and investors. His passing also made Klein feel sad, making him fully aware of his helplessness towards fate. Other than that, he was also very angry. He was angry at the murderer who had cursed Talim to death.
I hope that they can figure out what happened. I hope that the mandated punishers doesn't run out of manpower because of Duke Negan's assassination case.
Klein sighed as he got off the carriage and walked towards the gate. In the process, he discovered that there was no light at the Sammers house next door.
It looks like they're on their way to Desi Bay. Is this the New Year atmosphere in Backland? Yet I don't feel anything at all.
Klein momentarily felt melancholic. With these emotions in mind, he went to bed early and woke up at 7 in the morning. In an attempt to change his mood, Klein decided to bake a homemade cake today. He whispered, drinking his milk and flipping through the newspapers.
I'll buy the ingredients after breakfast.
Soon he saw an obituary in the Tussock Times. My beloved son, Talim Dumont, passed away on 18th December due to a sudden heart disease. His funeral will be held at the Crown Cemetery at exactly 9 a.m. on 21st December. In the northern continent, due to reanimations, it was already an ancient tradition to be buried as quickly as possible after one's death. Of course, this was on the premise that there was no shortage of money for a funeral.
Sudden heart disease. Is this the final result of the investigation, or could it be that the mandated punishers are trying to lull the culprit?
Klein frowned, unable to make a judgment.
Perhaps I can go above the gray fog to see if it's a trap set up by the mandated punishers, but there's a high probability of failure. After all, I don't have one of his items with me, nor was I targeted.
He took a breath, calmed down, and methodically filled his stomach. The subsequent attempt didn't exceed Klein's expectations. He could only leave Minsk Street and take a bus to Hillston to visit Isengard Stanton. The great detective walked in the warm room, pointed to the front, and said,
Sherlock, would you like some breakfast? My chef's skills aren't worse than mine.
Klein shook his head and declined.
No, I've already had breakfast.
Isengard stopped in his tracks and casually asked,
Where are you going to spend the New Year's? I'm planning on, returning to Lenberg.
Klein said, perfunctorily.
I haven't confirmed it yet. Perhaps mid-Seashire.
Isengard straightened his collar and touched the pipe in his pocket.
The scenery there was originally pretty good, but unfortunately there's an abundance in coal and iron resources. There was also a rather developed shipping industry. You seem to be a little anxious?
Mr. Stanton, I have something to ask you.
Klein took the opportunity when asked the question to relate in detail Talim Dumont's death, the results of his spirit vision, his advice to the machinery hive mind, and what he had seen in this morning's obituary. Of course, he had hidden the fact that he had become an informant for the machinery hive mind. He only said that for his friend, he had found an official beyonder he got to know due to the Desire Apostle case. He finally asked,
Do you think this is a trap by the mandated punishers?
Holding the pipe, Isengard said thoughtfully,
I've been trying to avoid the mandated punishers, and I don't know enough about the situation. I'll get someone to find out. If there's any news, then I'll write to you.
Klein bowed sincerely.
Okay, thank you.
In the evening, he received a letter specially sent from Isengard. There were only 2 sentences in the letter. This case isn't handled by the mandated punishers. The royal family has taken the case by claiming that Talim Dumont is a noble. Chapter 438, Invitation. Klein held the letter he received from Isengard Stanton and silently murmured to himself.
The royal family.
He looked up and outside the window, and he saw the rain pattering down. The gas lamps on the streets were giving off quiet halos. Inside the living room, the coffee table was neat and tidy, with a few stacks of newspapers placed in the corner. There was silence all around him. Klein sat on the sofa as he leaned forward a little. He sat there silently for a long time. After nearly 10 minutes, he exhaled and shook his head. Slowly and heavily, he tossed the letter into the trash can. He slowly stood up and expressionlessly walked to the second floor. And in the trash can, Isengard Stanton's letter caught fire silently and quickly crumpled into black ashes. On Monday morning, Klein stood in front of the mirror, pressed his right thumb and middle finger to his temples, and rubbed them with a little more strength. When he was done, he turned on the faucet, lowered his body, splashed the cold tap water onto his face, and washed his face while having a fit at the cold. After freshening himself up, he hung up the towel, walked to the first floor, and simply made a single-sided, well-done fried eggs with buttered toast. Of course, a cup of black tea with a few slices of lemon quenched his thirst and reduced the cloy sensation he was feeling. After breakfast, as he was idly flipping through the rest of the newspapers, Klein suddenly heard the tinkling of the doorbell.
Who is it? A new commission? Could it be that the machinery hive mind has already finished exploring the Aemon family's tomb? No, it can't be that fast.
Klein muttered as he put away his napkin and newspapers and walked slowly to the door. When he held the handle, the image of the visitor outside the door appeared in his mind. It was an elderly gentleman dressed to a T. His snow-white shirt was starched, and a thick grayish-blue vest completely hid his belly. The long tailcoat had sharp lines without any blemishes on it. The gentleman was wearing a pair of shiny leather shoes, so shiny that it was impossible to tell if he had walked through the rain or mud. He wore a pair of white knitted gloves with silver hair at his temples. His face was deeply wrinkled, and his light brown eyes were so serious that they didn't contain a hint of a smile.
I don't know him.
Klein mumbled and opened the door. He asked politely,
May I know who you're looking for?
The elderly gentleman took off his hat, pressed it to his chest, and saluted in the most standard manner.
Mr. Sherlock Moriarty, I'm a butler who has come to invite you in place of my master.
Do I know your esteemed master? Why is he looking for me?
Klein's head was completely filled with questions. But at this moment, he had already noticed a carriage parked across the cement road. It had a deep black outer shell, and there was a curtain on the inside of the window. It was obvious that it was nothing ordinary.
There's luxury amidst being low-key.
Klein looked closely and suddenly saw that there was a coat of arms in a conspicuous part of the carriage. The main body of the coat of arms was a vertical sword facing down, and the hilt of the sword had a red crown.
That's the Sword of Judgment. It's the Sword of Judgment representing the Royal Augustus family.
Klein's heart palpitated as he roughly understood the butler's background.
Perhaps he's a rather powerful beyonder.
Klein made a guess. The professional and stern butler didn't pay attention to his scrutiny. He revealed a polite smile and said,
You have never met Master, but in a sense you do know him. You have been providing him clues about the organization that is symbolized by the tarot cards, and he has paid for the money you need.
As expected, it's the important figure that Talim mentioned. I've been using false information to fleece for funds, and even submitted all the reimbursements that old Kohler required to him. I can't refuse his invitation now, especially when Talim is dead.
Klein pondered for 2 seconds and said,
Did your master come to me, due to Talim's death?
Yes, Talim was his friend. He was sad and confused by his death, and he heard that you were there when it happened.
The old butler articulated clearly.
No, I wasn't.
Klein subconsciously wanted to deny it, but he ultimately could only nod.
Yes, I saw Talim die in front of me.
It's really a sad and regretful thing.
The butler said in a sincere tone.
Are you willing to accept my master's invitation?
Do I have any reason to refuse? That would just make me look very suspicious. I might even be killed on the spot by you.
Klein looked at him and said,
I happen to have nothing planned this morning.
All right then. Mr. Moriarty, please.
The old butler bent down slightly, extended his right white-gloved hand, and pointed at the carriage on the opposite side of the cement road.
Sigh, I've been trying to avoid getting involved with important figures. In the end, I have no choice but to face the person behind Talim after his death. I wonder if this would attract attention or lead to more in-depth background checks. I have to plan ahead and be ready to give up my identity and this foothold at any time. Also, I need to get the human skin shadow characteristic and the deep-sea Naga's hair and advance to faceless as soon as possible. In that case, my ability to resist risks would more than double.
When Klein put on his coat and hat and walked to the carriage with the royal coat of arms, he had already thought of the subsequent developments. At this moment, the servant the old butler brought with him opened the door for him. Stepping on the thick brown carpet, Klein looked at the wooden cabinets containing red wine, white wine, champagne, Lanty, and black rand, along with the crystal glasses. Klein felt rather restricted as he sat by the window. Lanty referred to strong distilled spirits made from pure malt. There were many types, such as the sailor's favorite Lanty proof. The bottles displayed in the cabinets were obviously of high quality. As for black rand, they referred to strong distilled wines mixed with other fermented grains, which, like Lanty, was something unique to Loen. As the carriage drove through the wet streets, Klein asked in passing,
Are we going to Empress Borough?
No. My master is waiting for you at the Red Rose Manor on the outskirts of Empress Borough.
The old butler didn't hide anything.
Looks like this is the royal family's manor.
Klein thought for a moment. Then he asked with a smile,
Can you tell me your master's identity now?
The old housekeeper's back, which was already straight, became even straighter as he raised his chin.
He is the descendant of the founder and protector. He is the grandson of the Might-Wielder, the fifth son of His Majesty, Earl of Lastings, His Highness Prince Edisek Augustus.
So it's the third prince, the second youngest prince, but he should be around 21 to 22 years old.
Klein recalled what he had seen in the occasional descriptions in the newspapers and magazines at the Quelaag Club. The horse carriage passed through one street after another, going from an artificial lake to the northwest. After more than an hour, they finally arrived at an extremely large manor. At the entrance to the manor, Klein was inspected by two soldiers in red military uniforms and white trousers. He didn't hide the existence of his gun holster and revolver. He believed that there were definitely people around Prince Edisek who could tell that he was carrying a gun, and that it easily made things worse if he fooled them with illusions.
In any case, the prince knows that I'm a private detective, so his subordinates definitely wouldn't send guests to the police station just because I was illegally in possession of a gun.
Klein watched as the soldier took the gun holster and revolver before he was informed to take it when he came out. After two more inspections, Klein followed the old butler, went around the main house, and came to a wide area with hills and flowing waters. The only drawback of this place was that the vegetation had long since withered away in the dead of winter, leaving nothing but desolation. Tap, tap, tap. Several horses came running from the distance and stopped in front of them. A young man in white trousers, high-heeled black boots, a fitted shirt, and a dark rider's tunic nimbly dismounted and walked over. Everyone else followed closely by his side. He removed his helmet from his head and smiled at Klein.
I'm finally meeting you, Detective Moriarty.
Upon seeing this, Klein's eyes lit up. It wasn't because of how handsome he was, but because he looked like the Henry Augustus I imprinted on 5-pound notes. Edisek Augustus also had a rotund face and a pair of slender eyes, but he didn't look serious at all. Instead, he always had a smile on his face, looking young and spirited.
I didn't know that you, Your Highness, were the one who entrusted me with the task.
Klein bowed. Holding a horsewhip in his hand, Edisek weighed it in his palm and chuckled.
I heard that you played an important role in the serial killer and Desire Apostle cases. Talim's recommendation was indeed good. Sigh, who knew that he would be gone days after I was horse racing with him. He is gone to the kingdom of storm and lightning.
Since the founding of the kingdom, the Augustus family had always believed in the Lord of the Storms. Without waiting for Klein to answer, he said with a heavy expression,
The investigation into Talim's death didn't go through me, Mr. Moriarty. I want you to help me discover the truth.
The conclusion given by the rest of the royal family? Your two elder brothers? This sudden level of infighting isn't something I can handle. Also, Your Highness, your style is really direct.
Klein sighed.
I'm sorry, but I'd still say that Talim died of a sudden heart disease.
Is that so? News came from the mandated punishers that a detective by the name of Sherlock Moriarty had testified that Talim had signs of suffering from a curse.
Prince Edisac chuckled. Klein could only respond with a wry smile.
Your Highness, you should know the principles I adhere to. I still wish to live another 50 years.
Wasn't Talim your friend?
Prince Edisac asked. Klein was at a loss for an answer when a maid suddenly came from the main room, quickly approached the prince, and whispered a few words. Edisac's face stiffened.
Tell her that she's not to go out.
After he finished speaking, he took 2 steps forward. His serious expression softened, and a hint of softness and helplessness appeared in his blue eyes.
But I will permit her to leave the room and walk around freely in the manor.
Chapter 439. The Generous Prince. The scene before his eyes reminded Klein of the romance story which Talim Dumont had told him. His noble friend had fallen in love with a commoner woman and was insistent on marrying her. However, being in the top circle of the aristocracy, the marriage was absolutely prohibited. Talim had been vexed over this matter, and he had even considered the prospect of hiring a murderer, but in the end, he managed to persuade the woman to leave his friend on her own accord.
Could the main character of this story be Edisac Augustus? The situation is very consistent in all aspects. As a prince, marrying a commoner is practically treason in this era. Since the founding of Loen, the spouse of a direct descendant of the Augustus family could only be a noblewoman. From what I've just heard, Edisac has brought that commoner woman back, and he has even grounded her as punishment. True love.
In a split second, the story of a tyrannical prince and a pitiful, frail white flower took shape in Klein's mind. He looked into the distance, enjoying the midwinter scenery.
That's not what it really looks like. When spring comes and the grass sprouts, you'll see a golf course of the highest quality.
Prince Edisac dismissed the maid, raised his whip, and pointed around.
Golf?
Klein asked, simultaneously knowing the answer to his question. Prince Edisac motioned his guards and attendants away, leaving the old butler and Klein to follow him by his side. He strolled on the desolate plains, chuckled, and said,
Yes, golf. This is a truly aristocratic sport that even the owners of most magazines and newspapers have a hard time getting involved in. Although I don't like Roselle, I have to admit that the fantasy-like ideas he had have given us a world with plenty of fun. If you can figure out the truth to Talim's death, this place will always be open to you.
It was indeed Roselle.
Klein let out a light breath. Seeing that he didn't respond, Prince Edisac continued to lament.
There is much to learn from Roselle in every way, but his attitude towards feelings makes me sick. Of course, this is the common nature and style of most of the Intis aristocrats, and it's also the source of their infatuation with luxury and debauchery in their lives.
Looking ahead at the slow stream, Edisac said in a mature tone that was beyond his years,
99% of people are not geniuses like Roselle. In order to succeed and establish a great enterprise, one must first understand what they really want, and for that, they must be willing to pay the price and never turn back while persisting all the way.
As he said this, his tone became slow, as he laughed at himself and said,
Before this year, I had always thought that I liked the daughter of Earl Hall very much. She has perfect looks, an elegant demeanor, a rich fortune, a distinguished family, and a very powerful father. She's someone that no prince can find fault with. But now I understand that what I'm really attracted to is something that I yearn to have even in my dreams. It's a unique temperament and profound soul born from experience. I'm not saying that Miss Hall is lacking in temperament, but that wasn't what I want, admire, or like.
Your Highness, your tone, attitude, and expression are now almost identical to Talem just before he died. Don't suddenly die in front of me. Even if I were to jump into the Tussock River, there's no way for me to prove my innocence. Moreover, hearing much of this makes it easier for me to be silenced. Do you want to tie me to your chariot?
Klein felt a little afraid for some baffling reason. He cleared his throat and took the initiative to change the subject.
Your Highness, with your status and identity, you will certainly not lack subordinates. There are many people who are willing to investigate Talim's death for you, so why do you need me?
Edisak shook his head and chuckled.
As a prince, I have as much power as the little freedom I have. There are many things I can't let the people around me do, as there are too many eyes on me. You're a great detective with brains, and you have a good relationship with Talem. You were there at the time, so I don't think there's anyone better suited than you. Don't worry, if there really is a problem, then I can definitely guarantee your safety.
Such a promise is like toilet paper in the bathroom.
Klein couldn't help but silently lampoon. With Prince Edisak already saying this much, he felt that there was little chance of him leaving Red Rose Manor if he refused again. He could only sigh and say,
Actually, I'm as angry as you are about Talim's death, but reality has kept me calm.
Edisak smiled.
What can I do for you?
Talim's hair, either his flesh and blood, plus something he carried around with him.
Klein made the request.
Okay, then I'll have these delivered to your house.
Edisak agreed at once, and then asked curiously,
That's all?
Klein didn't stand on ceremony.
I will only know what kind of help I need when I have a preliminary lead. Your Highness, it's best that you give me a way to communicate with you. A private detective who frequently visits this manor would definitely arouse suspicion.
Edisak nodded and said as if he was prepared.
I'll have someone secretly rent the house next door to you, 13 Minsk Street. When you need to make contact, write a letter to your neighbor about visiting and put it in the mailbox. As for the reward, you should know that I'm not a stingy person, even if it ends in failure. As long as you contribute and take the risk, you will still receive the corresponding income. If you do find out the truth, I'll give you a reward sufficient for your retirement.
This prince does things really swiftly and decisively. Retirement? That would be at least 3,000 pounds.
Klein secretly sighed.
All right. May the spirit of Talem be at peace in the kingdom of storm and lightning.
He bowed. Edisak nodded slightly and instructed his elderly butler.
Take Detective Moriarty out and back to Minsk Street.
Why don't you keep me for lunch? Aren't you treating your guests in a little too arrogant a manner? Of course, it probably has to do with it being a long time before noon.
Klein silently teased him. He followed the old butler all the way out to the entrance of the manor and retrieved the gun holster, revolver, and the bullets. At 15 Minsk Street, Klein stood at the oriel window and watched the carriage with the royal coat of arms drive away.
Sherlock Moriarty might die at any moment if the investigation really goes deeper. Who knows, someone might be watching me right now. Not for now, since I haven't made any moves yet.
Klein frowned and stood still. Frew. At this moment, he was extremely eager to advance to Faceless.
I can't afford to wait for the machinery hive mind's exploration of the Amon family's tomb. I have to continue trying to buy the human skin shadow characteristic via other channels. After all, no one knows how long the machinery hive mind's preparations will take. What if it exceeds a month or even half a year? That's not impossible. They can first send people to guard the entrance and slowly gather the corresponding information so as to be certain that nothing goes wrong. It's not a bad strategy, but that's not something that I can afford to wait for.
As thoughts raced through Klein's mind, he made his decision. At 2:45 p.m., He brought his newspaper into the bathroom and actively prepared for this week's tarot gathering, 3 o'clock sharp. A deep red illusory radiance rose as Audrey Hall looked around in a good mood. Last night she had finally received the Sequence 7 psychiatrist potion formula she had been dreaming of. Her emotions were still a mix of excitement, agitation, and serenity. Furthermore, the psychology alchemists hadn't immediately asked her to make any contributions, claiming that it was an advance. They had full confidence in Miss Audrey's outstanding ability to repay them.
No new members.
Audrey stood up and gazed at the very end of the long bronze table. She raised the corners of her skirt and bowed.
Good afternoon, Mr. Fool. Good afternoon.
Her light and cheerful voice broke the unchanging silence above the fog, and it allowed Klein, who had been feeling a little depressed, to temporarily be rid of the troubles that the outside world had on him. He nodded slightly and responded to the members. Greetings. When she sat down again, Audrey brought the other members into view and created a dynamic scene with the previous observations.
When bowing, Mr. Hanged Man silently sized up Mr. Fool with inconspicuous curiosity. Then, he looked towards Mr. World in anticipation. In other words, with him having a deep relationship with the Church of Storms, he knows about the details of Duke Negan's assassination and is aware of the appearance of Hero Bandit Black Emperor. He has the desire to investigate the hidden truth behind this matter. There appears to be an outcome regarding the Werewolf Beyonder characteristic, which Mr. World had entrusted him to sell, and he has also probably found the human skin shadow characteristics, or the deep-sea Naga's hair. The Sun's emotions are very stable and relaxed. This means that he believes that the City of Silver's surveillance on him has been lifted. What did he rely on to make this judgment? Has he been reallocated to the so-called exploratory teams? Fours is a little depressed, despite feeling relaxed. She passed the Abraham family member's test and has become his student, but she was forced to accept something that was disadvantageous to her. Mr. World is as cold and deep as ever. Perhaps when I reach sequence 7 or 6, I'll be able to grasp his emotional changes and thoughts. While the Fool is still as mysterious, powerful, and unfathomable.
A series of thoughts flashed through Audrey's mind. She looked at the figure shrouded in the gray fog and said,
Honorable Mr. Fool, I have obtained 3 new pages of Roselle's diary.
It was a copy she had requested from the psychology alchemists. However, as she had only mentioned it last night, Escalante only had the time to give her 3 pages in such short notice.
What kind of reward do you want?
Klein asked with a smile. Audrey replied sincerely.
Can you just treat it as the reward for answering my previous question?
As she said this, she had an inexplicable feeling of flaunting herself.
Mr. Hanged Man and the rest of you still don't know the existence of the Twilight Hermit Order. Phew, how envious. I wonder what problem did Miss Justice seek guidance for in private. I'll write to teacher when I get back, and I'll ask him if he has Roselle's diary, no. To the outside world, notebook.
Fours immediately had the desire and motivation. Under the Hanged Man's suspicious gaze, Klein nodded without any care.
Sure.
Audrey quickly produced 3 pages of tawny diary entries and passed them on to Mr. Fool. Klein took them and read them. On the first page, it wrote, 13th January, contact with Mr. Door stabilized. Footnote 1. This is a Chinese proverb, which involves jumping into the Yellow River. Chapter 440. Angel Family. Just as Klein picked up the diary, Audrey added,
Mr. Fool, I still have 10 diary pages which will be given to you later. It is for the payment for your previous blessing.
She repeated her private promise so as to not let Mr. Fool think that she had forgotten about it, and the reason why she had provided payment for the information regarding the Twilight Hermit Order was to first settle the debt while having the intention to show off a little. The payment for the blessing. Fours ruminated over these words and suddenly realized an important oversight on her part.
On the matter regarding the Abraham family, Mr. Fool had sent his angel to help me interfere with the divination. I should have paid an appropriate amount. Oh no, I did not realize this at all. I thought, like all rituals, that it was the end to it once it was completed.
For a moment, Fours fell into a panic. During ordinary ritualistic magic, if one prayed for help from a deity or a corresponding existence, they would perform a sacrifice in advance. Burning essential oils, extracts, and herbal essence that pleased the target was equivalent to making an advanced payment, but in the rituals corresponding to the Fool, there were many steps that could be omitted, and the price could only be paid afterward. Sometimes, there was not even a need to offer anything. Forzos, who was accustomed to the former, ended up only saying a word of thanks. She hurriedly looked towards the end of the long bronze table and earnestly said,
Honorable Mr. Fool, your divination interference had helped me greatly. I will try to find 10 Roselle diary pages as soon as possible as well.
Seeing the performance of Miss Justice and Miss Magician, it dawned on Derek Berg that he had found a way to fully express his gratitude.
However, the City of Silver does not have the diary pages of the so-called Emperor Roselle. Well, Mr. Fool is very interested in history, so I will have to read more books and records on these.
With a thought, Derek made a promise to Mr. Fool, who sat high above them. The hanged man watched all this from the side, and had no doubt that the Fool had an angel at his service.
Any organization should have a character like Miss Justice. The power of a role model is limitless.
With a lot of debts to collect appearing out of thin air, Klein happily sighed inwardly. As the high and mighty Mr. Fool, he always found it awkward to directly ask for compensation, and he had always believed that helping the members of his own organization was a normal and reasonable thing to do, without the need for him to make it so reliant on transactions. Thus, he did not control the world to put on the appropriate performance to remind everyone. Of course, if Justice and the others were willing to provide payment, then Klein had no intention of refusing it. He smiled and nodded before shifting his gaze back to the diary in his hands.
All right.
13th January. Contact with Mr. Dorr stabilized. The powerful Beyonder, who is lost in the darkness and trapped in the storm, did not rush me to complete a complicated and difficult ritual so as to help him return to the real world. He seems to have understood that he has to come up with something that would move me, instead of giving me 3 intangible wishes, in order for me to consider whether I should take the hidden risks of saving him. Mr. Dorr temporarily did not mention this matter, and instead, with great interest, chatted about my tarot card creation. The word creation should be written with quotation marks. From this point, it is apparent that Mr. Dorr is able to make contact with the real world at particular times and through particular methods, and he should be able to observe a lot of details. While talking about the moon card, I thought of a matter Zeratul mentioned. He said that the life school of thought worships the moon, but not the Evernight goddess. Yes, I added the second half myself. Hence, I asked the 4th epoch expert Mr. Dorr about this question. He chuckled and similarly did not give a direct answer. However, compared to the furtive seer who speaks half-truths making me want to beat him up, he is a lot more frank. He told me that if he were to choose a card from the tarot cards to represent the Evernight goddess, he would not choose the moon, but the star? That makes things very interesting. I pressed, "Who is the real owner of the moon?" His reply was even more worthy of relish. He said with a laugh that the moon currently has no owner. If I did not misunderstand him, then he means that the peak of the moon's pathway is empty. The sequence 0 is empty.
That is not right. Is not there a primordial moon?
Upon seeing this, Klein suddenly had this thought. He had already anticipated that the moon card did not represent the goddess. Whether it was the faith of the life school of thought, the attitude of the vampires, or the records in the Book of Secrets, they all vaguely pointed out that Evernight was not the moon. In contrast, vampire ancestor Lilith and the primordial moon resembled the sequence 0 of this pathway in more ways. According to the City of Silver's history lessons, Lilith had most likely fallen in the Dark Epoch, the 2nd epoch. However, the primordial moon was an existence that people still believed in and sent responses to even to this day. Of course, those who prayed to her would not end up well. Why did Mr. Dorr say that the moon had no owner at the moment? As seen from the Book of Secrets, the primordial moon still existed during the 4th epoch. Klein almost frowned. Soon, he came up with 3 guesses. First, Mr. Dorr did not know enough about the hidden primordial moon, but that was a very low possibility. Second, that the primordial moon was actually the disguise of another deity, not essentially occupying the position of the moon's sequence 0 pathway. Third, that she was a sequence 1 of the moon's pathway or was in disguise and had the corresponding sealed artifact.
And one more possibility. It is the response from the moon pathway's uniqueness.
Klein muttered silently. The most important Beyonder ingredient in the sequence 0 potion formula, described by the Black Emperor card, was not all of the sequence 1 Beyonder characteristics, but something called uniqueness. Different pathways had different uniquenesses. A true god was unique.
Other than the first guess, the other possibilities are not small. What is the Beyonder pathway of the moon?
Klein turned to the second page of the diary and was lucky enough to discover that it was connected to the previous page. I continued pressing, but Mr. Dorr refused to say more. Hey, he thinks that I will rescue him by whetting my appetite? Dream on! I hid my curiosity and scoffed at Mr. Dorr for not being respectful enough to true gods. He casually replied to me. This is the attitude a Fourth Epoch noble has to the deities. This guy is too good at acting. However, I really am interested in the nobility of the Fourth Epoch, so I took the opportunity to ask. Mr. Dorr told me that in the Tudor dynasty, there were 5 noble families: Abraham, Antigonus, Ammon, Tamara, and Jacob. Each family was known as an angel family, and they possessed tremendously terrifying strength. Angel family, just the name itself, raises many problems. It really makes one yearn for it. Mr. Dorr said that the number of angel families in the Fourth Epoch exceeded the 5. There were the Zaratul and Zoroast family, which had always been loyal to the Solomon Empire, the Augustus, Sauron, Einhorn, Castilla families of the Trunsoist dynasty, and the furtive Anduriel and Beria families, as well as the Demoness family, which stemmed from a true goddess which was one step up from the angel families. So the last winner of the Fourth Epoch was the Trunsoist dynasty, but where did their royal family go? The 4 angel families, Augustus, Sauron, and the others, divided up the northern continent. Just as Mr. Dorr said the previous time, the strongest powerhouses in the Fourth Epoch far exceeds my imagination. However, most of them have been buried in the ashes of history. Even the Sauron family has waned, destroyed by me. In another 1 to 2 millennia, perhaps the Augustus family might no longer exist. Only the true gods appear capable of forever illuminating the real world. Although some deities perished in the Fourth Epoch, they should only be few in number. This makes me think of something that was previously written in a web novel which I memorized. It can be used here with some changes. Ashes await those who fail to become true gods. After the communication period ended, Mr. Dorr disconnected. He is like a prisoner who is released on parole for a fixed period of time. And he does know a lot. When he mentioned the Zaratul family, there was faint contempt in his tone. Perhaps I need to maintain my relationship with Mr. Dorr. Apart from the Church of the God of Steam, Zaratul, and that secret and ancient organization, I should leave another outlet. Unlike the saying, a wily hare has far more than 3 holes.
When Emperor Roselle was struggling in the end, he was only thinking about the organization that is suspected to be the Twilight Hermit Order. He did not mention Mr. Dorr at all. Something apparently happened in between. So the ancestor of the Lowen royal family, the Augustus family, was actually so rich and powerful to be an angel family. However, why did the royal family of the Trunsoist dynasty, to which they were loyal to, disappear just like that?
Klein suddenly thought of a few things. In his desire to clear away the fog that shrouded the history of the Fourth Epoch and see its true appearance grew. This was also the greatest hobby of his body's original owner.
Perhaps that underground relic with 2 side-by-side seats and a terrifying evil spirit will help me answer a lot of questions.
Klein lowered his gaze and flipped to the 3rd page. 2nd June, Bernadette massaged my back. It is good to have a daughter. She knows to care for her old father, and although I can see what she wants at a glance, at least she is willing to put on an act. Besides, She did a good job. I asked her which Beyond Her pathway she wanted. She said she was undecided, but she liked the maxim of do as you wish, but do no harm. 3rd June. I saw Florin again. He is very different from before, as though he is a different person. No, he still had his original memories and some of his distinctive characteristics, which is enough to prove that he is him. What exactly happened to him to experience such a huge change? Perhaps a metaphor could be used to describe it more precisely. Some monsters are physical sutures, while he is a monster of mental sutures. 5th June. I obtained an ancient book. It actually mentions the primordial demoness's name, not one of an honorific name. Her name is Cheek, but that is a man's name. Is this ancient book fake?